Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for joining another one of our webinar series here. My name is Louis Mick, and I'm the chair for DocSIG, and I'm joined here by several DocSIG members. We've got Kevin here and Divya. I see Stella there as well. You'll probably be able to see us with the DocSIG logo in the background here. For those of you that don't know what DocSIG is, you can learn more about us at our website on docsig.org. But we are essentially the doctoral student resource arm of AMA. And so we're here to provide resources and tools for all of you. And I just want to highlight real quickly before we begin that the Higher Ed SIG has extended their deadline. They're doing a special session at Winter AMA, and the deadline is now October 18th. And again, you can find this information. I'll put the website here in chat. But if you have a paper that you want to have focused on the future trends in consumer behavior, this special track is of interest to you because the top papers in that special session will then be considered for the special issue for JCB. So really awesome opportunity for doc students that you should all take care or be sure to look into. But today we are privileged and excited to have Dr. Mukherji from King's College London. She's a lecturer in marketing, and she's going to be talking about what do you do once you secure your first job. So this idea actually came up. We were talking with Ezra, and it was this idea that it's a mad dash and a scramble to get a job. A lot of us are on the job market now, and if you are on the job market, you could put that in chat. I know myself, it's just a lot of applying and flyouts and all this stuff, and it's all hectic. And then you reach that finish line and kind of look around and go, okay, now what do I do? And so we're really excited to get some insights here on what does those first 6 months look like and how do we navigate this change? So without further ado, I'm going to pass the floor over to Dr. Mukherji. Thank you so much.
Hey folks, good to see you all here, and a special thanks to Louis, Kevin, Divya, and Stella and Ezra, of course, who's not here yet, for me to be invited to speak to you and share whatever little wisdom, knowledge I have. And what we'll do is I have sort of divided it into 2 or 3 categories and not too many slides. I speak a lot. If you were ever in my class, that's how it would be. And as I finish sort of each of those sections, I'll wait to see if you have questions, which you can either raise your hands and one of the moderators would be looking at that, or put it in the chat. There you go. So before I start anything else, let me just give you a quick snapshot of who I am. I know I'm at King's College at the moment, but if I could start with my couple early degrees. So I come from the natural sciences. I came through doing a BSc honors and an MSc in physics. And then I worked in a bank, and those were all in India. Then I emigrated west, and I was in the University of Toronto for a couple of years getting an MBA, except that I got a PhD offer. So I quit after a year and a half, sort of summer internship. Headed right off to get a PhD at University of Southern California in Los Angeles. And once I got through that, where you are, it's probably one of the most exciting times in one's life. I would love to get back there again. But I worked at the University of Minnesota, and then we just moved to the university. We moved to the UK, and now I'm at King's. So the other thing that, in case I can't hear you if you're speaking, is I do have a hearing disability. I'm wearing a hearing aid, but just letting you know that if you shout out a question and I can't hear you clearly, I might ask you to either type or restate your question. Therefore, I have a bunch of, not too many, hopefully, slides to take you through, and I'll start sharing my screen. There we go. Share, and I can go into the full slide now. What Louis was saying was it's only about the first 6 months. That's the part I didn't realize. So I have a little more than the first 6 months, hopefully. The first 6 months are what I call celebrate, but also, and this is, I will keep comparing the US and the UK market a little bit, but this is predominantly my experiences and what we go through in the post-AMA in the US system. So yes, you absolutely want to celebrate that offer, and if you've negotiated it beautifully, I believe the previous speaker mentioned how you could negotiate certain things, but fair enough. Now you have it. What do you do with it? The first thing is, of course, to consider moving to where you have to. Now in the US, if there's a possibility, I would always suggest you move in summer. It's a nicer time all over the US. If you're driving with all your paraphernalia, it's fun. I know a lot of people have done that previously. In the UK, you join on a joining date, and that's how it works. Now, most of you are aware of this about progression paths. So in the US, one usually starts as an assistant professor, moves to associate on tenure, most places, and then on to full, and then there's a chair professorship, which is somebody who's full is given a chair. Now, this nomenclature is distinctly different from the UK. In the UK, one starts as a lecturer, gets promoted to a senior lecturer, a reader, and in the UK, professors are sometimes called chairs. So the chair in the US is different from somebody who's called a chair in the UK. Further, in the US system, a lecturer is not an assistant professor. So if you see somebody who's a lecturer, it's a different kind of position. A lot of times it's either predominantly a teaching position. It's not a tenure track position. So that's the difference. So what I have here is what is called the tenure track position. And in the UK, it could be either research and teaching track, which is comparable to a tenure track position, or it could be predominantly an academic education pathway. Both of them have similar designations for people. So that's sort of please remember these things. I just did a paper, a review piece that's coming out. It's been accepted. And there was this thing where I needed to correct my rank there because it's a predominantly American way of looking at assistant professors, associate professors. Right. So now let's get to, you've moved. I have a few other hints about tips on moving, etc. But you've moved, and your commitments wherever you are will be threefold: research, teaching, and services. Now, the emphasis on each of these bits varies by the type of school you are. And this is where I want to sort of go through. I'm hoping you're already aware. If not, I'm happy to touch upon this, that in the US, there are tiers of schools. Some of them are very heavily research-based. Some are, those are probably the top 50 schools with, of course, rankings, etc. in there. Not to say they don't do outstanding jobs of their MBAs and their teaching, but the focus for somebody who's joining is predominantly research. And then there are schools that are more focused on teaching. So your portfolio of what you're expected to come up with when you're going up for tenure would differ slightly in those circumstances. And there you have it, the variation based on types of schools. Now, in the UK, yes, you have that variation, but the variation is less stark, much less stark. So it's more of everything is middling in some ways, other than if one were to be on the academic education pathway, in which case the teaching load is much heavier or more requirements of the teaching than the research aspect. Some tips on that moving bit. In the US, salaries are usually a 9-month salary. So if you're coming out of a European or UK system and you're offered something in the US, do read the fine print on your contract. And good research schools will usually offer people an extra 2 months worth of salary, which is called the 2 9s, thus making you what we call 11 months worth of salary, which, by the way, you can ask the payroll to pay you over a whole year. So this, how you distribute it is just an administrative thing. But what you get paid is a 9-month salary. The UK contract is an annual salary contract with bands and pay splines and all kinds of things. The US is you get what you get, and Uncle Sam, the US government, takes their share of the taxes. Now, yes, there are minor increments in the US. It's nothing to talk about. The UK, because a lot of people are part of the union. Now, that's something I didn't put here, but since I'm mentioning it, I might as well let you know. There is a union, UCO, which is the University and Colleges Union, and a lot of academic staff, as they're called in the UK, are members of the union. The US does not have a union, and therefore it is an individual contract. It is negotiable. There are bonuses for publications. It's a very different system if you're moving to the US. The US schools do have pension schemes. Again, this is where I want to highlight something. The US pension schemes, the university will put something on your behalf, you will put something on your behalf, loosely speaking, and you get to choose out of a set of companies that your university has contracted with. So it's not just one company generally. You pick how much of your pension you want to put in each one of those, and you manage it pretty much. If you go to a company that manages it, they'll give you certain funds. But how much of that pension you put where, in which of those companies, is your decision. You manage it. So strictly speaking, it's a defined contribution. You contribute, the university contributes, whatever you make out of it is your business. Unlike in the UK, where it used to be a defined benefit. So the university would contribute something and you would, and what is called the USS, the University's Pension Scheme, most of us are part of that. There's another one as well, would then every year send you a statement saying, when you retire, this is what you will take home every month, and this would be a lump sum. Now, the UK system is changing as well, not just in universities, at other places, high schools, into a defined contribution. So right now, King's College pension scheme will be, a small portion will be defined benefit. This is completely moving away from the traditional UK system, and quite a substantial part will be defined contribution. So you're welcome to contribute more or less, and you decide. USS at the moment is contracted with one agency, and you can choose to manage how you want within that. So you do have flexibility on managing your pension in the UK through the defined contribution part. Now, healthcare, this is the flip side of being in the US versus UK. UK, you're all covered by healthcare. Everybody is covered by NHS, so not a problem, which is the National Health Scheme, National Health Services. In the US, your university will take care of your, again, they'll give you an option of 2 or 3 different health schemes where you contribute, you decide on the copay, the premium, that each of those will have certain offerings made for the university, and you pick what is right for you. But yes, there will be healthcare that you probably want to look at when you sign the contract. Most good universities will look after that. A lot of them might, the healthcare may or may not include dental care, just letting you know. Of course, there's moving budgets and details, especially if you're moving from another country. Get those things up front. Now, most universities, reasonably good ones, will have a research and teaching budget. And this is, from my personal experience, certain universities will let you carry over unused money for a few years at least, till you're able to spend it. And or in the UK, at least King's College, you don't carry it over. What you don't carry reverts back to the university. So there are trade-offs in trying to rush and use it or just let it lapse. Conferences, again, certain universities I'm aware of in Europe will allow your budget to pay for conferences only if you are presenting, not to attend or not simply to attend, while other universities are fine if you're attending. So these are sort of nitty-gritty details. Now, if you are moving, housing, if you're moving to a new city, especially, and big cities, I moved to London and it was quite a challenging thing. We had a young child at that point, and where, are you buying a house? Are you renting one? Sometimes, especially in the US, if universities are very keen on you, they will consider housing loans. If, sometimes that's built into the contract anyways for most university employees. Some universities have their own housing, which you sort of buy for the duration that you're an employee. So for example, University of California, Irvine has that option. You do buy it, but it's something, it reverts to the university when the person retires and leaves or quits the university. Of course, there are things to consider, neighborhoods. The US is a very varied country. It's not as uniform as some parts, most of the UK. UK has much less heterogeneity in terms of locational quality, both in terms of crime and school districts. There's some issues with school districts in big cities like London and so on, but for the most part, that's not high heterogeneity. So the variation is huge in parts of the United States. And you do want to figure out, talk to the locals about where you want to live. Distances. The US, again, if you're moving from other parts of the world where you don't drive as much, driving is a big deal in the US. So you have to balance those things out. If you have family, then schools, all of that. What kind of schools, states, government or state schools, or private schools that you have to pay for, all of those options. So these are some of these personal issues that I wanted to just highlight. And these are things you will have to make a decision on in the first 6 months, by the way, for the most part. Now, let's get to what really your life is about. If you are in the US, mainly the North American and US system, it is true, it is publish or perish. I will not mince my words here. That's reality, and you had better get used to it. And the big thing is, when I'm hoping you would have taken this research environment that you're moving into and how you fit in. You are all doing PhDs, so you have had an experience of choosing and checking your match with where you're doing the PhD. I'm hoping that's something that you would have done when you accept a particular job. Now, the tenure clock, and this is the US system, is usually 6 to 8 years. Most schools, there's some schools that are aberrations and they have a very different way of looking at the world. The thing to figure out is what is required for tenure. This number has kept going up. So there was a time when many years ago, people who are now almost retiring, they had a top number of 4. It's gone up to 6 in some places. But the quality of the journal matters. It's not just the quantity. In the US, when I said 4 and 6, I meant what is called A journals. For marketing, those are pretty much countable on one hand. So JM, JMR, JCR, management science, marketing science, and a few others, right? Top journals, that's it. And that's why those numbers are relatively smaller, 6 to 6, 7, that's what they're looking for. Now, the UK is different, at least it's undergoing some changes, but I'm aware of the fact that UK at some point, people who are currently not so senior have a lot, but they have in what the Association of Business Schools in the UK, or the ABS list, calls journals 1 and 2. And I think a lot of the UK schools are moving away from 1 and 2. At least some of the better schools are moving away from 1 and 2. But the US is absolutely B's. Look, when something doesn't fly at an A, people send it to a B and hopefully get accepted. But a B is not really the way to go. You don't target a B, very simply put. And so you're welcome to look up, but this is a conversation you have with the people when you are joining. What are sort of the basic minimum? What do you have to do to get there? And like I said, it's not a whole lot of words on the slides, but it's this conversation that you need to have with whoever. Now, I call it a treadmill. So things that happen regularly, your annual review, which is a lot like the UK, you will have an annual review. And at this point, I do want to clarify. So the university is something like King's College London, or let's say the University of Minnesota. Within that, you have a business school and within the business school, you have what I'm calling the Department of Marketing. Now that could be group. King's College doesn't have a department, it's called group. And we have a King's Business School. So when I'm saying department, it's the marketing people that I'm thinking about. So colleagues in rank, meaning if one is an assistant professor, the associates and the fulls either vote or fill out a survey. They look at your output for that year, your research output, your teaching output overall, and then they say meets the criteria, possibly meets, or not so nice things about. And there's a process. So they will come back and let you know what goes on. This is annual review. If it's a 6 to 8 year clock, then there's a midpoint review for the tenure. And at this point, the candidate is expected to write a statement on their research, their teaching, and whatever services they've done. And the research one, of course, you talk about all the great acceptances you've had, and then what's on the pipeline and the expected outcome. So there is a vote by the colleagues in rank inside the department. And then the school, the dean, all of them look at it, and then they give you feedback about hopefully everything's fine, on track, needs some effort, or go down the line from there. Now, the tenure year, which usually it varies by the school or university, but around your 5th year, if it's a 5-year clock, or the 7th year, if it's an 8-year clock, the candidate starts making the package, what is called the tenure package. So essentially a detailed statement about research, teaching, everything. So it's a substantial piece of work that one needs to do. It's just like your job market package. And then externals are invited by the school, if it's a business school, to write. They send out the packet in some ways, get them to write letters one way or the other. And there's sometimes a committee or all colleagues, this varies by schools and universities. They read through your body of the full work, and then they make recommendations to the department. So, and then the department, everybody in rank, so the marketing academics will read through the recommendations from the committee, internal committee, which could be only marketing or marketing and some others, and the external letters, and then they vote. Everybody votes. Everybody in marketing will vote. If that's a go, then it goes to the school level, the business school level, and then everybody in rank has a vote. Once that is supported, it goes to the university. The universities is a much smaller group generally for most places. Most times, once the business school has been cleared, at least in the US, unless the university has serious issues about the process, it's not been a big non-support. So the university generally votes on that, and then you get your letter, and some people will give you a clock, as in the tenure clock, and that's it. And most places, that means one gets to be called associate professor. So make tenure, and the rank changes as well. So I actually had a schematic out here for you. Now the schematic has some other details in terms of course, when you meet your housing guys. Now, sort of a hint and tip. It's a very good idea to be in touch with your supervisor. And this is, I would say this, I mean, I'm still in touch with my supervisor, not that we work together anymore. They are your primary mentor in this profession. In fact, they're sometimes my supervisor, and they say grandparenting the next generation and words like that. Now, I got this in the schematic, and if everything is great, you come out here, support the head of the group or the department writes positive letters, the dean makes a case at the university, and you're done. In the unfortunate instance that somebody doesn't get support here, these dotted lines, sometimes the candidate is still, this varies by university. Some universities still give the candidate the right to go up for tenure. If they continue not to be supported at the departmental level, some universities continue to give them, these are university level policies, so much higher level policies. They still have a right to go up to the school level. And if that doesn't work, usually they're advised about it very strongly. Most people, now, if one is advised that they haven't made the cut at the department level, there are times when people could negotiate extra time. There's different ways to do that. Sometimes they will ask for study leave, and it depends. And this is a privilege. It's not always given. Based on what their evaluation of the candidate pipeline is. If these are really good papers that are just taking long and the candidate is working their heart out, most times they will. Also, the perspective is if they've made the effort to make you go through the AMA, invited you to campus, like you enough to have given you the job, they would like to retain you, unless there's serious personality issues, which is not the norm. So both parties have the same interest. One has an interest to make tenure, the other wants to retain. So they try and help the candidate, but there are times when it just not going to fly. And at that point, what the candidate is advised is their options. Some people might choose, because this happens sometime by December. Some people might even take chances at the winter AMA if they want to. Most people wait till the end of the academic year, and then they have one full year. So from the time they know in December, they have a year and a half to switch. And that gives them enough time. Maybe something comes through in the pipeline, as well as they send feelers out. And I know for a fact, a lot of places have actually, where people have actually succeeded in that next place of work because things got stuck in the pipeline. And through all of this, your supervisor, and this is a relational thing. Most people I know in the US, my generation, they are very closely consulted, they consult their supervisors and heads of department. Like I said, most people will help you. It's just that didn't work out at that place, that combination didn't work. So my thing is, yes, it's a treadmill, but maybe it's okay to rest and then jump onto the next machine. That's also something you want to keep in mind. So the UK system, this is still changing. I have seen changes at King's College from when I joined. So here people start at lecturer, and there's no word for tenure here. And it's usually a probation of 2 to 3 years. It will be in your contract. Annual reviews still happen. At King's, it's called PDRs, Professional Development Reviews. And some schools will have a specific mentor, but it still goes through the system where you write it up, write what you've done, report on things. The probation at King's and some of the other UK schools I'm aware of, mainly internal. Some schools have switched and are also asking for external letters, even for probation. And then generally the head of staffing at the school level at King's, or plus the head of group, will advise when it's time to go up for it. And the full professors do have a vote, at least at King's Business School. They have a vote, at which point the dean then forwards your packet to the university committee, and then the university committee makes their decision, and you get a letter from HR. And not much change in rank. A lecturer gets probation, which means they just become permanent in that post. So unlike the US, there's no change in rank. While I was talking about probation, there's something that just occurred to me. Let's back up one time. Yeah, I have talked about tenure, and then we have annual reviews, internal processes. Yeah, but the thing is, because UK is changing, when you get a UK position, you do want to ask what the requirements for probation are, what the requirements for promotion will be. King's now has a document, and it's always a good idea to see what is required. Very much so. Now, so tips about your work. Again, slightly more US perspective. Very few, I know of only one case still now, historically in marketing, maybe 2 or 3 that I'm not aware of, will ever work in the same university as where they graduated. You have to leave. You might be welcomed back with open arms once you established yourself. That has happened. Their PhDs go out to stellar performance, and lo and behold, their alma mater calls them back. That's fine. But you have to leave. And I think that's a very, very, very good thing. And on another note, I always tell undergrads, leave and do a master's elsewhere. Most people I will advise leave. Otherwise, you get stuck in the same research mode, same teaching mode. Not good. Now, when it comes to tenure, if you have a lot of papers with either your supervisor or other people, might be the same. The thing is, if it's the same other people, especially people who are established, who've been around in the profession longer, then in some ways you don't get to showcase your own. So it's a good idea not to work with the same people all the time. Yes, of course, you work with the supervisor, you publish with them, you work with the new people and the research assistants in their new place of work. You will meet people in conferences or network, but hopefully not the same people every time. Try and give talks both internally and externally, not just at conferences. If you can visit universities where you can talk, that would be great. In the US system, in decent research schools, there's a stream of PhDs, right? And it's part of the contract with the PhDs that they have to do research assistantships. Most places will have enough PhD students or candidates, mainly students in the first 2 years of their PhD, who will then be allocated to different academics to do either a one-term research assistantship or maybe even 1 year, depends, varies by university. And it's fascinating. As you guide them, you come up with new work and becomes a paper. I personally know of people who were students who then went on to publish that paper with that academic. So it's a really good system. If you can get your RA to start working on things that you'd like to work on and they would like to work on, it's a joint project while they're learning. So there'll be some supervision, but it's outstanding ways of actually starting new work. Pipeline is very important. So in fact, I think I have something out here. I had a colleague at Minnesota, she's very well established. And her thing was, if you don't throw things at the wall, nothing will stick. So it's a constant stream that needs to get sent out to top quality journals. There's no letdown on that, at least not for till 10 years later. And by which time you're probably doing it in your sleep, so you keep sending them out. But pipeline is very important. Just a few is not enough. And upgrading one's skills is a good idea. I know as assistant professors, there's a whole lot of pressure, so it may not happen. But as you go through, it might be worthwhile to pick up if you're doing more new CV stuff, what's going on, if you're doing more quant work, what are the new techniques, what are the new models, all of that. Before I move on to teaching, so let me stop sharing my screen and check if there are questions, queries in the chat. Hey, Ezra, good to see you.
Yeah, we did have, there was a question that came through. And you know, this question has been something that we've kind of talked about in some form or fashion before. So I'll just kind of sum it up for all the questions that have been asked about this. And you know, there's definitely going to be salary differences between US schools and UK schools, for example. But I would imagine that there's a lot of factors built into that, right? So like you talked about the healthcare and how, you know, you're paying into pension plans and you're paying into things like that in the US. So have you noticed that the salaries are comparable in terms of the way, you know, your living standards for UK schools and US schools? Can you talk about salary differences at all in that vein?
I could, except I was under the impression the previous DocSIG last few slides had covered this, but I will give you a very honest answer. No, the UK salaries relative to the US are substantially low. And if you live in London, you can well imagine how far that salary goes. Not much, not far. While it is true that assistant professors in the US have a market pay. And so I actually took a huge salary cut when I moved to the UK. I'm going to be honest about that. And so if I were to be a rookie now, and if you have a US job, go for it. That in terms of salary, not how much you fit on the system, or if you like the system, that's a different story. But if you only looked at numbers, you'd be much richer then, much richer, because your salary is higher, your pension, what you put in your pension will be higher. Living standard costs are not that much high. I mean, London is higher than a lot of US. So, and the US is a big, very big market. So if you live in a place like Minnesota, you could live in downtown and not live London lives, but you still have a very good, rich life. There are places, of course, New York is comparable to London, and I suspect the salaries will be higher. It is negotiable. I know for a fact that Stanford gives a huge amount of housing support, because it's well nigh impossible to get housing in around that area. It's in a very well-to-do, you know what I mean, very well-to-do neighborhood, and the neighborhoods just next to it are very difficult to live in, and therefore, because of that starkness, that's part of the US life. Universities do tend to do that. So yes, absolutely, those numbers don't look odd to me. Yeah, not at all. In terms of healthcare, the NHS will take care of you, so you don't need that money. But if you are in the US, yes, those things you will have to think about. See that your university is giving you good healthcare. But remember, the copay, it does come out of that 180 or 230 pay you have. And you look, the point I'm trying to make is, in the US, with that kind of 180K that one gets, it's a decent life. So that much is assured. In the UK, on lots of things, it's fine. But you realize the UK, and this, maybe I should say this, UK, marks bands are very tight. People don't, the pass mark is 50 and the max somebody can get in their exam is 75 maybe. Similarly, the salary bands are very narrow. So it starts maybe 40, 50, it doesn't go up that much wherever you live. The US, it starts high, and then you can negotiate it up as you publish more and more. So people could get really good outcomes in the US because it's all negotiated. So this is a more, I don't know if this is the fair way, but most, even the Tory government probably would agree, the relatively right wing, that even that government is probably way more socialist than the Democrats in the US. It's just a systemic difference, fundamental systemic difference about individual ambition and reaching for that ambition versus what the UK says, let's share the pie more equitably, if you like, and that's it's more guided, more controlled, more managed by central forces, etc. So, oh, by the way, for those of you who don't know, Esra was our student at King's when she was pursuing her master's degree. That's how I know Esra. So other than the salary question, I'm happy to take this further if that's what you would like, but are there questions about research outputs, etc.? And I didn't mean to scare you, but I will not sugarcoat it either. Okay, in which case I can move on to the next part of your life. That's teaching. Oh, you've gone right back to where I was, publisher parish school. Teaching. Now, based on, is it share? Yep, it's sharing. So most schools, both UK and US, will give you a lower load at the beginning of your tenure track or research and teaching track, if that's the track you're on in the UK. In the UK, if you're on the teaching track, then that's your primary job. And then the nature of publications will differ, both in quality and the places you would publish and the quantity would differ. But the fundamental differences in the US and UK system. So in the US, most schools will have a semester, 2 semesters are taught, which is about 14 to 15 weeks, early September to middle of December. In the UK, it's usually called a term and 10 to 11 weeks. In the US, there are certain schools that have quarters, which are 10 weeks, and then you would generally tend to teach at least 2 quarters. But in the US, for early career, in a reasonably good research university, if you talk to people who are arranging this early upfront, and if you have a preference to teach in one term, they could make it happen with 1 or 2 preps. So you might have to deliver 2 different classes if you want to get it all done in 1 term. If you like it over 2 terms, you could even do 1 prep, but over 2 terms, depending on what class or module you're given to teach, course, module, whatever you want to call it. And they're very accommodating for the most part. If it's a big enough university and there are enough classes running. Also, so I have colleagues who like spreading it out in both parts of the world, in both countries. Some people like it because they have a teaching day and then research days. Other people, I load up. There are universities where the load could be divided over 2 years. So, for example, if it's a 20 units and each course is, let's say, 4 units, you could do 8 in 1 year and 12 in the other. So you would do your 20 units over 2 years, 10 plus, instead of 10 plus 10, where you break the unit, you can do that as well. So there's a lot of flexibility. Now, in the US, most classes are, it was always face-to-face, and basically you would meet once or twice a week, depending on what class. MBA is maybe once a week, substantial amount of time, that one time, or twice a week for about 1.5 to 2 hours max. Any one session would be about 2 hours, so, but twice a week maybe. And that's it. So there's not that concept of tutorials. Now there is usually a graduate teaching assistant. They do what is called teaching assistant session, and there it's voluntary. It's basically we would go there as even as PhD students. We had a senior PhD as a tutor for a tutorial session, and we go there and ask him all the questions. How do I do this? How do I do that? If one is a PhD in the US, then many of you are probably handling MBAs on that. So the academic, once you're an assistant professor, you don't have to do that anymore. Frequency of meetings, I just sort of mentioned. Assessments. Now, the US, anywhere, starting from primary school, it's more constant assessment. So regular in-class quizzes, etc., happen a lot more. It's changing in the UK. It's starting to happen somewhat more, and much less focus on a final exam, while the UK is still substantially focused on a big piece of an exam. And I'm only in the business school, and outside the business school, probably. Now, the marking system in the UK is there's a first marker, the second marker, and then it goes to external exam. Therefore, it takes about 4 to 6 weeks for it to come back your marks. In the US system, basically, whoever taught with a TA will be marking it. And sometimes the turnaround is as quick as 72 hours for that last assignment. With the result, what used to happen in December is we get our marks in before we left, and the marks just go into the system, get opened up. And in the US, if maybe there was, we make errors in adding up, fine. The student comes back to you directly and says, do you mind checking? If you check and you find an error, you put a note to the registry, and within 24 to 48 hours, it goes through and that's done. Though, to be honest, if that's not as simple as that, then there's a whole other process everywhere, as one would hope. In the UK, like I said, it takes a few weeks for the marks to come back, and then there's always a process for having feedback and so on. So it's much more structured, a lot more, not just structured, a lot more bureaucratic, honestly. Now, the marks band in the US, marks range from 0 to 100, but students are graded on a curve. So generally, there's this focus on getting people lots of B pluses and then spreading them around to the Bs and B minuses. And it depends on the university where it falls on the curve, also your course. So if you're teaching maybe a research course where generally people tend to score higher, the university is probably okay getting a little higher for the mean and then spreading. In the UK, the marking is very tight. In my own experience, I came here and on a piece which wasn't actually a final, which wasn't going to be in their final marks, I gave somebody a 98. And oh my gosh, I had a not very long meeting, but a very nice meeting where I was informed that you don't do this. And this is something we tell all our students now. The mark band is very tight. It's pretty much 0 to mid-70s. And that's the UK system. So let's just face it. So if you're moving from the US to the UK, don't start marking people around 75. It's a big issue. Well, there'll be some, but basically remember that's your band. And they're not graded on a curve. It might change. There's a whole lot of conversation about grade inflation in the UK. We'll see how that happens. Student evaluations have always been counted in the academics review. So while in the UK, there has been variation. Some universities count, King's does count now. So our PDR review, our evaluation, how I'm evaluated for my teaching is going to be counted in my appraisals. One big tip is talk to people who taught the course you're supposed to, especially if you're moving countries. The delivery mode, how interactive you need to make it, etc., is very different. The US traditionally is a lot more interactive, lot more hands-on in terms of teaching, because there's no tutorials, right? The session you have is the session you have. So definitely consult and discuss with the people you are going to be working with. I have found this one where I say request and sit in classes led by outstanding teachers. Doesn't have to be a marketing professor, by the way, marketing academic. Could be from management, could be from finance. If they're outstanding, they're outstanding. See what they do. Absolutely. And most people will be very happy to have you sit in their class. So reach out to them and say, may I sit in your class? And I know for a fact my supervisor, who was then a professor, actually sat in another person's class because he wanted to learn more. And I'm always grateful for him having shown us the way. Junior colleagues, people who are assistants like you, are very, very good at work. You can, talk to them about things that are going well. Sometimes things don't go well in the classroom, and you want to network over coffees and lunches with them. Absolutely, build that network. They will, sometimes people can't come into class to teach. People pick it up. No worries. You tell your supervisor, your senior, and you tell this junior colleague to cover for you. Happens everywhere, goes through fine. And doesn't matter where in the world you are. These networks will always be very useful for you, good for you actually. And if there are doubts about processes and systems, ask your seniors, ask the head of the department. I'll give you an example. So there was this one student who unfortunately was really upset about their marks and kept writing to me, and I kept telling them the issues that happened, this, that, blah, blah, blah. And finally said, I want to see my exam or something. And I talked to my head of department and he said, no, that's work in process. We don't share it. And this is how you frame it and say, if he needs it, we'd be happy to sit down with the university's legal people to work it out. And never again heard from them. So yes, there will be students who will push back, who will challenge you for no good reason. Be warned. And see that you have backup from your seniors. This is my own experience, and I'm not the only one. I have stories from lots of other people, but I didn't want to share those ones here. But absolutely, do not. I know you're students, but there's a process, and that needs to be solved. And the same thing with UK. Early career. I was very, very much benefited from an early career teaching session in Minnesota. I still remember the people with whom I went through that. Outstanding. If you have that opportunity, then it was called the Bush early career teaching, not the Bush's, the president or anything. This is a different set of people. They endowed that training session. Excellent. In the UK, there's an association, a professional association called the Higher Education. It's probably a good idea if you want to continue to work in the UK to consider getting their accreditation. Good rapport with the professional services, as they're called in the UK, or staff in the US. They'll go out of their way to help you. And one thing that, like I said, my boo-boo with the marks, don't assume that systems are similar. They are substantially different. So in some ways, if you're moving places, you might want to sit down and ask somebody to brief you on how those might be different. All right, folks, let's see. Before I move on to services, are there questions, queries, concerns? If during tenure publishing target was not achieved. Now, Khalid, the thing is with, remember you have an annual review. So you'd be getting feedback and there'd be a midpoint review around year 3 or 4. And if at that point that the school is suggesting that it's unlikely that the candidate would get all that's in the pipeline done before that timeline happens, a couple of options would be to look at extensions, if that's something the school would consider. Else, start sending out feelers for moving. It's never bad. It's your life. And a horizontal move where you get to restart your clock then gives you that extra, if one has spent 3 years and you restart the clock, you're already ahead by 3 years. And if they're giving you a full clock, then you have had 9 years from when you graduated. And like I said, I know lots of people who benefited from that horizontal. And there's absolutely no problem with those things. Usually it doesn't happen through the AMA, sometimes in the winter. With teaching track versus how much does the teaching requirement differ? Substantially. Versus have switched. Okay, so in the UK, at the moment, traditionally the teaching track has been the teaching fellow track, and then recently King's converted it to what we call the academic education pathway. There, the number of hours required to be taught is much higher. Also, the publication pressure is towards publishing in education journals. Marketing journals are fine, but more towards how you are working towards researching education itself. So because it's an education pathway, that's why it's different. In the US, there's schools that are predominantly focused on teaching, and therefore their tenure research requirements might be lower numbers, and they may have a mix of A's and B's or not. And if it's a purely teaching school, then clearly it's closer to the what we call the A education pathway in the UK. So yes, there is substantial difference, and to be honest, moving from the research track to the less research track is probably a smoother move. I totally see there are times in our lives that we think it's not for me, this is not working out, or even I'm enjoying the teaching component so much more than my research component that fine, my professors told me to do this, but I'm more happy if one is not happy, one's not going to do their best. So that move is probably smoother. Now, you can well imagine if somebody is on a teaching track, teaching them lots more hours, and therefore, out of the 24 hours, has not been able to devote as much time to publishing in top journals, then the numbers are lesser. I mean, I'm just making a more common sense approach to this. Therefore, the switch might be more difficult. But is that not allowed? Absolutely not. The moment if you have 6 papers on a teaching track, I bet people will look at you the moment they see your CV. I know of people who've been associate at relatively less ranked schools, but the moment people start looking at their CV and they see top papers in JCR, they're like, why is this person underplaced? And then they move. Up has happened. And the underplacement at that point was on, I know that person, and therefore, for 2 reasons. Her spouse then had a great job in that location where the university was of a slightly lower rank than when they finally moved. So that happens. They were happy in that place. She'd made tenure comfortably. She was publishing in top journals, both quantity and quality, and then she made this vertical move upwards. So that happens. People who publish well, unless there's something suspect, which I'm hoping none of you will ever face, and are willing to move. Now, that person could have said, look, no, my husband's job is here, I'm not willing to move. So in that sense, they remain placed where they were. But there's no reason why people can't move. So, but to be fair, from a teaching track to the research track is a more difficult path than the reverse.
Can I follow that with a question? I just unmuted myself. That's all
right. Well, ask Louis and Kevin.
So yeah, so is 6 papers a target when once you're in the, you got your first job, you're already in there. Your first goal should be 6 4-stars. Is that what you're saying would be the target?
Yes, for most schools 6 sounds fine at the moment, at least for people. Yeah, 6 4 stars, and those are called the A's in the US system. type A journals. So yeah, that would be reasonable. And by the way, there are universities in the UK that want that as well.
I remember we talked about this earlier, that one of these papers usually could take anywhere like 3 to 4 years to, turn
and
out.
I don't know if you missed that last one slide I had where I quoted a colleague saying, unless you throw things at the wall, nothing is going to stick. So you keep hitting them, all these journals, and even if it takes 2 to 3, you're hitting them while you sort of hit the ground running, as they say in the US. So you've sent something out while you start your job, and then within that next academic year, you've sent more, so something's come back from review, and then you've sent more and done the review. I called it a treadmill, and yeah, you'll be on that pretty much. There was no good social fit with the group. Yes, that too has been noted, but again, the person looked for something, and once they moved, they've actually flourished in their new place. I know this person personally as well. So, and both parties, the candidates, so the new faculty and the people who were there, they both sets realized that we are good, he's good, he realized I'm good, they're good, but we're just not matching. And that's when, give it some time, and then if it doesn't work, you're welcome to look again. And this is where, keeping in touch with your supervisors or where you graduated from, they might send out feelers on your behalf and sort of let them know that you have a good pipeline, you want to work hard, but you're just not fitting in well. You're feeling uncomfortable working there. And for the most part, they'll be able to help you. And again, your network that you might have created by going through conferences, etc. You keep your eyes and ears open. That's the best way to do it. Okay, and we'll take questions later if you'd like, but I can share my screen on services. Hang on, guys. Okay. Right. So usually, most schools will not load you up with a lot of services, mainly at the department or the group level. And in the US system, mostly you will be invited to be part of the recruitment, which is you might sit in on the next round of candidates I remember doing that in the year right after I joined. So I joined in summer. I was sitting across the table from the previous year, listening to new candidates. In the US, most places, the assistant professor will have a vote on new recruitment or recruitment, by the way. Unlike in the UK. The UK, the vote isn't really, yes, we vote saying the word here is appointable or not appointable, and that's about it. So there's no, if you go through the US system, you know that there's no interview as such, your job talk and you meet, and then this is the other side. You probably are knowing more than you need to if you're on the job market. People will vote, and then if the dean and all those meetings have gone fine, then that's it. But this is one of the jobs that in some ways it's very nice to be on the other side of the table. Having got that job, you feel so happy, and now you're able to evaluate people in a nice way. Good citizenship, please do attend meetings. I know we are busy doing our research, but talks, etc. Give talks, both internally, externally. And when I say internally, if there's a bigger forum, not just the marketing one, talk to your seniors and see if your work is, matured enough to present to the larger school. Jump in and try and arrange speaker series for your school. I see a lot of you already doing that through the DocSIG, making network connections. PhD committee members. You could be a PhD committee member. Usually assistant professors are not primary supervisors. Also, I think this is true of the UK. People without having completed probation are not allowed to be primary supervisors to PhDs, but you're definitely welcome to be a committee member and contribute. And who knows, you'll get a paper out of that combination. By the way, in the US, a lot of PhD students write the paper with the supervisors. They're the first author is the student, who then is not a student hopefully by then. Your reviewer roles, it's both part of research and service. So being a reviewer on journals is also counted as service. You are welcome to mentor people who are new recruits, and you can mentor PhDs, not just as supervisors, other PhDs, your RAs. So those are roles, sometimes you're called upon, sometimes you do it as good citizenship. The service component is not onerous at all, pre-tenure, for sure. What happens here? Now that you've made tenure, I wanted to use the term from airlines industry, sit back, relax, and well, enjoy that. But keep publishing and teaching. You have to do that, but deepening the research. So what do people I know this is just starting out, but what do people want to see when you're heading towards full professorship? Yes, your pipeline, but then impact becomes important. Impact is a word much used in the UK. Essentially, your citations will start counting. A lot of papers, but low on citations is rather tricky. And therefore, the letters invited, every step, by the way, will invite letters. So from assistant to associate, there'll be letters from outsiders. From associate to full, definitely. And the question they will ask is, would you appoint them as full professor at your place of work, at your, and I know I talk a lot, so lots of talks, books, awards. So basically, you continue to shine in a more mature, deeper way. You've done it, you've made tenure, now you get, so maybe there are, things that are risky projects. Take them on. Risky projects are fine pre-tenure as well, but given there's this lack of time, because super risky, and if you get it, then you just go through. But if it's super risky and it doesn't, then it becomes tricky. But don't keep doing the same old either. So take risks. But here, the world is your oyster. And you will, of course, be supervising PhDs who will then, write lots of papers with you, and more PhDs you place out in the world in good positions. That's something to count. You will chair lots of committees at all kinds of levels in the university, become heads of groups, departments, deanships, presidents, and vice chancellors, principals, pretty much up there. So I see, potential in every candidate. Now, here are some other things. Do you get study leave and sabbaticals? In the US, it's usually 1 full year after 6 full years of service, but you don't get full pay. Universities vary, but generally half pay is normal. Don't hold me to the pay bit, by the way. UK, the tradition is 1 term after 6 working terms, and usually a full pay. Family leave, extra time, yes. If one has become a parent, then the clock can be stopped, and there's a way to do this. So that is available. When I was there, I was the only one who found out, because I don't think my husband was going to take it then, but maybe that's available to men as well. I believe it's available to men. Varies by university. Visiting positions to explore if you'd like to do that. On the personal life, I'd say it's a challenge like any other profession. The biggest one is heartbreak, breaks from rejection, because a lot of times most people see a connection, most professions, there's a connection between one writing something and it getting published. A journalist writes something, after editing, for the most part, gets published. Other people do consultancy projects, their firm, or they give it to the agency that employed them. What do we have to show when it's totally rejected after multiple rounds? Nothing. That's the sad part of our life. That's why I called it heartbreaking. But we need to come out of it. So it's also a mark of resilience. And this is where there's balancing happening. Teaching evaluations. We work very hard. Sometimes it doesn't gel with the students. And it's not as great as what I've had before or I'm going to have tomorrow. We'll work harder next time, modify, listen to our students, and we'll move on from it. So that's part of it's not a job, it's a life. But the good part is there's no fixed retirement age in academia. So you could keep enjoying this life for as long as you want. It's totally yours. In neither country, nor in Canada. They tried to do that, but it didn't succeed. So not Canada, not US, not UK. We are not forced to retire legally. And therefore, all I will say is you need to enjoy what you're doing. Enjoy your academic life. Whatever it is you do, in the classroom, at your research seminar, there's nothing more satisfying for a full life than enjoying what one does for one's profession. On that note, I'll stop sharing, but I am here to respond to queries. How to best negotiate the service workload at the school without creating tensions? Khalid, could you explain what you mean by service workload?
Hi, yes. So at school, you might get some, in the UK in particular, that you can do things to do, let's say, with student tutoring, for example, extra supervision for undergrad that someone or staff has left, and then you have to take over more workload because of that gap. It could be extra marking as well. It could be extra preps for teaching on the side. Some of these elements or admin work in general.
Yes. So in some ways, Khalid, you have pointed out a difference that I hadn't brought about in too much detail, but because the UK system isn't as geared towards research and teaching in some ways, it is a more moderate combination. I do see what you're saying. So there are things like dissertations that are written by MSc students. This is not true of the US. MBAs don't write dissertations. They do group projects and move on. And therefore, this load does fall on junior faculty a lot of times. I understand that. And one of the things might be if you have to do it, especially with dissertations, if a lot of the juniors sort of could talk, maybe, and this is just a suggestion, and consider if the university could make monetary compensation for that, because somebody has to pick it up, I understand. And so yes, that might be one way, but I agree it will take away time from research, and we just have to then maybe sacrifice some bits of personal life, and that's a fact of life in the UK. So dissertation, then there's a whole other thing called personal tutoring in the UK, which doesn't exist in the US. So for those of you who are in the US system, personal tutoring here is an academic is assigned to maybe 10, 15 students whom they're supposed to know, get to know them. I can see where the system came from, but with the number of students we have and the kind of professionalism that's required, one single academic who may not even be teaching them is not going to be able to deliver. And this is something I've mentioned at King's. We need a system like the US where there's student services, right? Student counseling is what it's called. There's a whole department called student counseling where they go for academic counseling, they go for personal counseling, and that's already professionally set up. But in the UK, it's sort of more of the tutor, that thing continues, it's a 400-year-old system, and the UK doesn't change if it's not broken. So it's not broken for the most part, that's what's believed, and it continues. But Khalid, I hear you. I hear what you're saying, and one of the ways maybe to consider talking to seniors to say, marking support, if that's possible. If there's some ways you could get some marking support. The dissertation, yes, that supervision probably has to be done by the academic themselves. But there's certain things we've started doing at King's, by the way, for our dissertations, because we have a lot of people. And this is a good idea to have group meetings to lay out the structures and then have dedicated days for dissertations. So you can have a calendar day when each of those students comes and meets you, so that it's more manageable in terms of time, and then structure it and have set expectations. So our dissertation time, we go ahead and tell students how many meetings will be available, and that's done at the group level. All marketing dissertations will get this many hours, structured this way, and the calendar is sort of mentioned by the person leading those supervisions, your group of supervisees, upfront on day one. So it's time management is an issue, indeed. I totally hear you.
Thank you so much.
Happy to talk one-on-one as well if you'd like at a later date.
Thanks for that. May I have just a quick follow-up question on a teaching load between the UK and the US as well? So in the UK, they allocate very less time for teaching. Like, let's say for 1 hour teaching or lecture, they will give you 1 hour for prep. And I don't know how it works also in the US. So is that kind of like a similar system, or it's a different? They give more time?
Okay, what you're saying is for 1 hour of teaching in the UK, your university accounts 1 hour of prepping.
Yes.
Is it?
Yeah, so
Okay.
1 hour.
Well,
prep.
and so the US system doesn't even count workload like this. They don't do it like a job. So here it's more of a timesheet system. We don't fill a timesheet, but we have what is called a workload. So in the US, what they say is you will teach 2 courses of, let's say, 15 credits. And you have all they need you to do. What you do at home, how many hours you spend, they don't need to know. What they will want you to do is face those students for the 2 hours twice a week per module. That's it. So there is no such workload model. And therefore, there's no dedicated research day. The rest of your life is researching. So it's a very different structure. It's way more, for want of a better word, it's a flexible system. And the academics I know who worked at night at the university, some even had sleeping bags, and that's it. That's how they work. So unlike the UK, where there will be a security person, and most of
I better buy my bag now.
Sorry?
I better buy my sleeping bag from now.
There you go.
Thank you.
Sure. Other questions, queries? No? Cool.
I think we're done.
You?
No, I think that was helpful for all of us.
Oh, it's good to, eyes and ears open. I think better informed, make better judgments.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just to know what's expected at different levels helps all of us to prepare better and not feel like it's some big monster that we need to tackle in as soon as we're in.
It's not. It's just being aware and doing it. Really, just doing it.
Thank you for today, Prokriti.
I'm not
Sorry.
a good question tonight. No, I'm not.
For what? Sorry?
Nike.
Thank you for Prokriti. I think we're covered all the questions. It's been great for all of us, I'm sure, here at the moment. We would also be putting this out later, so I'm sure some of the members would benefit from this as well. And thank you for your time. And for everyone attending, we have a deadline for higher education special SIG coming up on 18th of October. So please look into that. It will benefit you all. And yeah, is there anything else you want to add to that, Louis?
No, just thank you so much. I mean, your openness and ability to cover, the big 3 topics in multiple markets at the same time was really helpful. So thank you so much. I know it's going to benefit all those that watch this afterwards. So thank you for your time and for your
Sure.
willingness to speak to us. And I know it's getting quite late for all of you in the UK
Okay.
there, so we really appreciate it.
Keeping back in now, but no, it's been a privilege, and all I have to say is enjoy your time as a PhD and look forward to your time as an academic. This is a great life. So all the very best to each one of you, whether you're on the AMA or on the UK market, wherever. So you can move anywhere in the world. There are jobs all around. Keep your eyes and ears open and go for it. Good luck to each and every one of you. Take care. Stay well. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Have a good weekend, everyone.
You too. Yeah. Thanks.